I love you so much. I don't know what I would do without you. And her husband says, is that you talking or the wine? And she says, it's me talking to the wine. And he was increasingly sick. He seemed to have like a low-grade flu for a year and a half that he couldn't shake. He was losing weight. He was losing hair. He started to look jaundiced. His teeth were yellow. All these things that were not the way he had been. When we split up, he was about 25 pounds overweight. You know, within a year, he did the typical like middle-aged divorce guy thing. He lost 20 pounds. He started drinking like wheatgrass. He started running marathons. But he looked really good, and he was working hard and everything. And then the weight loss continued, and everything started shifting, and things didn't seem right. So about 5 years after this, one day after a period of intense chaos, my kids and I could not reach him for 2 days, and he had been very sick. So I decided to go up to his house, which was about 25 minutes from mine, and check on him. Because even though we were divorced, we had a very codependent divorce. We were raising kids. We were still friends, even if we were divorced. And so we really tried to be a family for our kids. We still did holidays together and stuff. And we had keys to each other's houses. So I had kind of decided, that's it. I'm going up. I'm going to take him to the hospital no matter what. I'm done with the, playing games with he won't go, he's sick. And I got up there and I found that he had died. And after that, this book is kind of about what I learned from that. So he had died, and I initially thought, well, he must have died from working too hard because he worked all the time. But he actually died from an infection that he contracted from intravenous drug use. So he had been hiding this addiction for at least a year and a half, but kind of hiding it in plain sight. So I think the thing that struck me was that this man was killing himself in front of all of us, and none of us noticed it, or none of us recognized what we were seeing. I shouldn't say we didn't notice it, because we did. But myself and the people in my life all thought it was everything but drug use. I thought he had bipolar disorder. I thought he might have been psychotic. I thought he had an eating disorder. I thought he had a metabolic disorder. I thought maybe he was just a jerk, like he was just being, self-involved and narcissistic. Then it turned out he was diagnosed with a thyroid condition, and I thought, oh, that's it. That must be it. And it turned out he did have that, but he was missing one big symptom of that, which was weight loss, which was weight gain. He had Hashimoto's, a disorder of the thyroid where it's underactive. And so I kept saying to him, you're supposed to be gaining weight, but you're losing weight. And he said, well, what can I tell you? I went to a good endocrinologist. Let's see what happens after I start taking medication. So all these things didn't add up, and then I was faced with this. And so I wrote a story for the New York Times in 2017, which some of you might have read, called The Lawyer, the Addict. And in that, I explored what was going on in the legal profession. Because once I started to put together what happened for Peter, I heard more and more from other attorneys who were using all kinds of substances, and I thought, there's something here that needs examining, so I'm going to look into this and try to figure out for myself what happened to Peter and just what happened and what's going on in the profession. I wrote that story, and it got an enormous amount of traction, far more than I thought it would. It was the front of the business section on a Sunday, which, most of us go to the style section, right? But it definitely struck a chord, and at that point I was thinking of writing a memoir, and so then I wound up writing this memoir, which is a much bigger examination of kind of what happened to Peter, what we all missed, and the impact on myself and my family and his colleagues. And there's also some original reporting in it about the generation that's coming kind of up now into white-collar circles, people that are young millennials or Gen Z, and the fact that there are a host of substances available to them, very accessible and widely used, and what that might mean for us as a society going forward if these are going to be the professionals that are in professions that lead the country, like lawyers and judges and the heads of banks and finance companies and technologists. What does that mean for us as a society? So that's what the book is about. I thought today I might do 3 short readings, and I'll set each one up, and then after that, open it up to any questions you have. Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to start with the prologue, which is, the book starts with me finding Peter's body. And so I am driving up to his house to check on him. I can't reach him. And this is how the book starts. July 11th, 2015. I plug in the code to the gate at Peter's house, and the door swings open to an expansive rectangular backyard. The grass is mostly brown, $20,000 fountain in the center no longer burbling, its white stones covered in algae. I go to the front door and put my key in the lock. It's made of a heavy glass and makes a whooshing sound as it opens, like the door to an office building. There's a staircase immediately in front of me that leads to the main floor, and to my right is the only room downstairs. It was intended to be a family or rec room and has a glass wall facing the yard. I always thought it would be a great place for a party. Now it's been converted to a bedroom for our daughter Anna, who is home from college for the summer. She stays here at her dad's house a few nights a week. Down here she has more independence, as well as her own bathroom. The bed is unmade, clothes and a bath towel litter the floor. Anna hasn't been here in 2 days. Neither has our son, Evan. I call out, "Peter?" No answer, no sound from upstairs. "Peter, are you here?" I climb the stairs to the main floor. It's perfectly quiet and still. I take a minute to look around. The house is an architectural trophy, made of steel, wood, and glass, all sharp angles and sunlight. Through the windows, I can just make out a white line of seafoam hitting the beach. I turn toward the kitchen. On the counter immediately to my right, there is a large, nearly empty takeout soda, the kind you get at a convenience store, some candy wrappers, piles of work papers, an asthma inhalator. Peter has been sick for more than a year with some kind of ongoing low-grade flu, constantly exhausted and weak. He's lost 30 pounds, maybe more, since we split up 5 years ago. But in the last 6 months, it's gotten worse. My kids say he sleeps the whole weekend when they are here, forgets to grocery shop, never makes meals. He doesn't seem to be going into the office much. The last time Anna and Evan were here, 2 days ago, their dad could barely lift his head off the pillow. Evan tried to take him to the hospital, but Peter refused, got angry and snapped at him. Then he vomited onto the bedroom floor, threw a washcloth over it, and went back to bed. No one has been able to reach him since Thursday morning. I've come here to check on him, to make sure he's okay and take care of him if he isn't. I turn down the hallway where the bedrooms are located. "Peter," I call again. "Peter, I'm coming down the hall to your bedroom, okay?" His bedroom is at the end of the hallway. Its door faces me and it's open, but I can't see anything except a corner of the bed and a cluttered night table. I walk past my son's bedroom with its one orange wall and IKEA bed, past Anna's old bedroom. One wall painted deep pink and another wallpapered in a forest of black trees with little blackbirds resting on branches. Someone has cut out a silhouette of a rat and pasted it onto a branch. I am nearly at his door and start calling his name again in earnest. "Peter, Peter." I can see into the room. "I'm coming into your room, Peter. I'm here to check on you." The covers on his bed are drawn back and I can see the crumpled white sheets. There are a few tissues in the bed with spots of blood on them. I'm starting to shake badly as I walk into the bedroom. Peter isn't in the bed, so I turn toward the master bath. Then I see him, lying face up on the floor between the bathroom and the bedroom. I stand there, unable to really understand what I'm seeing. My mind is struggling to comprehend this. That's him? What's on his face? There's a cardboard box under his head like a pillow. I walk over and kneel down next to him. His right arm is bent at the elbow and resting on his chest, a gesture he often makes, even when he is standing up. He holds his arm that way when he's making a point, pressing his thumb and first two fingers together for emphasis. Our son does the same thing. I touch Peter's arms to shake him awake. They are stiff and hard to move. His fingernails are blue. I put my hand on his chest to try and feel his heart. I suddenly remember lying in our bed when we were married, spooning, my chest up against his back, especially when I was cold or couldn't sleep. I would listen for his heartbeat, so much slower and stronger than mine, and feel safe. Now I feel nothing. So this next part is further down. So after the prologue, I go back to the beginning of our relationship, so our marriage, how we met, and then our divorce. And now this part comes, my daughter's in college, my son is in high school, and he's getting ready to apply to college, and we have a meeting with the college counselor at this very posh private school that Peter wanted our kids to go to. So all the parents make all the meetings, except for Peter. And we're sitting in the counselor's office, and Peter's late, and I'm texting him, "Are you coming? Are you here?" And my son is slinking down into the seat, humiliated. And Eventually Peter comes in and he waltzes into the meeting and says, I have Hashimoto's disease. And we were like, okay, but this is a college counseling meeting, you know? And then he explains he just went to the endocrinologist and this is what he has. And I'm thinking, okay, now we know what it is, and now he's gonna get better, he's gonna take his medication, and that's what's gonna happen. So he says, yeah, I should turn around from this. And so this is the weekend right after that meeting and after that doctor's appointment. The weekend after our meeting with Evan's college counselor was another one where Peter spent entire days in his bedroom. Anna and Evan left early and drove back to my house Sunday morning. They told me Peter left his room only to walk into the kitchen to a pan of brownies he had baked. He took one from the pan and walked back into his room without saying a word to either of them. Evan would have stopped going up there months ago, but Anna continues to want to be there. She is only home for the summer and wants some time with her dad while she's here. So Evan heads up to Peter's with her, the two of them believing each weekend their dad will start feeling better and start acting more like his old self. Monday night, I called Peter to ask why he was in his room all weekend. He sounds rushed and irritated when he answers, probably wishing he didn't. The kids are upset, I say. They don't understand what is going on with you. They didn't see you all weekend. What's the point of wanting them up there if you're going to ignore them? I told them I was sick, he says, exhaling loudly. I left a brochure about Hashimoto's on the counter. You left a brochure on the counter? I repeat, making it into a question, as if that will transform the statement into something that makes sense. Look, if you need to rest because of this, why can't you just talk to the kids about it? They are worried, Peter. They love you. I hear him sigh. I love them too, he says, and then the phone is silent for several seconds. What do you want me to do, Eilene? Tell them I'm very sick? I feel my stomach drop and adrenaline kick in. My heart is suddenly beating fast. I thought Hashimoto's wasn't uncommon, wasn't serious. I lower my voice and say, gently, sensing an opening for some kind of confession, Are you very sick, Peter? The phone is silent again for a few seconds. Oh my God, I think. It's not just Hashimoto's. It is something else. Yes, he says, more softly. I am. He isn't at home. I know because of the noises I hear behind him. Other voices, scraping chairs, music. What do you want me to do? He asks, not really looking for an answer, just exasperated. I'm not sure what exactly I want him to do. I want him to be healthy again, but I don't know how to get him there. If I had as much money as you do, I say, I'd check myself into the best clinic I could find and figure out what the hell was wrong with me. Excuse me, at that moment, more than any other, I am so close to the truth. I am millimeters from it. One changed word, clinic, to rehab, and maybe the jig would have been up, the game over. Peter would realize I had finally found the last piece of this puzzle I've been trying to solve, the one depicting a needle and a spoon and an elasticized tourniquet. But I can't locate that last piece. It's right in front of me, but I can't see it. I'm trying, Eilene, he says, finally. I'm doing the best I can. He hangs up before I can say anything else. And this last reading is from Peter has died, and right after he died, a friend's sister, who was a trust and estates attorney, was trying to help me find someone to help settle Peter's estate because I was going to need to hire a lawyer. And she said, listen, you know, he was dealing with people that, you know, you don't know what they're like. They may have the key to his house. They may try to come up there and steal things once they find out he's dead or look for drugs. You better get up there and take everything of value to you, sentimental or otherwise. And so we take her advice and we decide to go up there the very next day. And I am frightened to go up there again. So my friend's husband, who is also a lawyer, comes up with the kids and I so that we can go through Peter's things and take right away what we know we should take with us. And so we are in the house and we're walking into the house now with these boxes and bags we have. I have brought boxes and bags into which we can load items we want to take today. Anna wants to go start in the master bedroom, but I don't want her to see the bathroom floor, which I know is stained with blood and feces and vomit and urine, all in the vague outline of her father's body. But she is becoming frantic to get in there, to get as close to Peter as she can. So William says he will go in first to remove anything she shouldn't see. I start to walk in with him, but my body thinks Peter is in there, and for the first time in my life, I know what it means to have your knees buckle.
It's as if my kneecaps change from a solid to a liquid, the rubbery tendons and ligaments bowing outward. I don't fall as much as I crumple down. Mom, Mom, Anna screams, thinking I'm fainting. I'm okay, I say, but I don't go into the bedroom. William tells Anna it is okay to come in. She races to Peter's dresser, which sits below a window overlooking the backyard. Before I left yesterday, I pulled down the shades so that the neighbors, with a back porch that allows a clear view into this bedroom, can't see the disaster in here. From my perch in the hallway, I can see both the dresser and Anna. She is pulling shirts off the floor and out of drawers, putting each one to her face and inhaling to see which shirts still retain the smell of her father. Those are the precious ones, the ones she's jamming into empty bags and boxes. She buries her head in each piece of clothing, grabbing at anything Peter might have worn or touched. She wants everything, dirty or clean, on the floor, in the hamper, lying in a heap under the bed. She wants all of it, every scrap. She's like a starving person, desperate for whatever crumbs were left behind. Evan is in the living room and kitchen, wandering around, opening cabinets and drawers as if seeing the house and its contents clearly for the first time. Anna tells him to come in and grab some clothes. No, that's okay, just take what you want, he says loudly from the living room. But Anna insists, no, Evan, come in and take some things for yourself. You're going to want to keep some of this. Evan ignores her. He is not going in there. So she grabs a few t-shirts for him. I already know he'll never wear any of it, that it will sit in a drawer or a box somewhere because it can't be thrown out, but it can't be worn either. William emerges with boxes full of things like expensive stereo speakers, notebooks, cameras, all kinds of electrical and USB cords, an iPad, and Peter's work bag. Inside the bag is $1,000 in cash, a pill bottle with no label, an Advil bottle. Both bottles contain a variety of different colored and shaped pills. There are 3 slim silver tubes of scar cream, individually packaged alcohol wipes, and tiny clear plastic tubes I have never seen before. Later, I will learn they are plastic needle caps, presumably from hypodermic needles that were used at the office. There is a small spiral notebook with what looks like notations about daily injection times and dosages of tramadol, an opioid painkiller, and cocaine, a combination usually referred to as a speedball. Peter was able to organize himself to get drugs, but not anything else. Thank you. Wants to ask questions, have at it.
Did people at work notice? What about his work environment? Did the other lawyers know?
You know, he did work very closely with a lot of people, and I will preface this by saying his firm is very powerful and has a lot of money, so I have to be really careful. Their official statement to me was that they did not know, and he was very good at hiding it. What I will tell you is that he was getting boxes of tourniquets delivered to the office and other medical supplies that came through the mailroom, and that his boss told me he saw in Peter's office. Law firm culture is such that people generally don't get into each other's business, and also they're all very busy and stressed, and it is likely that even if they thought, well, that's weird, they just thought, I'm not going to get into it with him. So they claim, you know, their stance is that they didn't know. It's hard for me to believe they didn't. I mean, I'm sure they knew something was going on and that he certainly wasn't well. The general counsel of his firm did call him and ask him to see a doctor. And when he came back and said, I have Hashimoto's, they were all satisfied with that. And I can't fault them because I was too. So that's a very good question. It's part of the reason I wrote the book, because we all, anybody else?
His work had to be suffering?
His work was suffering. His boss, this is an odd thing, but it's in the book. About an hour after Peter died, his boss showed up at his house. So I don't know why, but he said that somebody in the neighborhood called him. I don't know why somebody in the neighborhood really would call him, because Peter wasn't friends with that many people in the neighborhood, but apparently he found out that something was going on at Peter's house, and so he came. And he did say that Peter had kind of stopped showing up for work for the last 4 or 5 months, and that he would be in meetings and be kind of incoherent, like not being able to kind of stick to what was being said. And this was at a very high level. They were all intellectual property attorneys and a lot of complex pharmaceutical stuff and medical device stuff. So yeah, I think they did notice his performance was suffering.
How did the children find out, your children find out, that this was the reason that he passed?
That's a good question. It's in the book too. The day when I went up there and found him, my daughter was texting me like, "How's Dad? What's going on?" And I asked the police officer there, "What should I do?" And she said, "Don't tell them that he died. Have them come up so you can tell them here." And they came up, and I did, and it was horrible, as you can imagine. But the medical examiner is the one who told me that it was drug related, and at the time we thought it was an overdose. And I was like, "No, it's not that." And she was like, "Yeah, no, it is that." And she said, "We actually see a lot of that now." And that's what made me think, as a journalist, that there was a story there, but obviously I couldn't do anything about it then. But I decided to tell my kids that it was drug related, and it was a huge relief for them because they had seen him 2 days before he died and couldn't get him to the hospital. And I think my son especially was blaming himself for not saving his father's life, and so it really relieved him of that guilt that he was very sick anyway, and it was very unlikely you could get him to a hospital because he was hiding this.
Sure, thank you.
What are the statistics for this happening in the legal field?
So there was a study done in 2016 by the American Bar Association and Hazelden Betty Ford, and it asked questions about alcohol and drug use. So lawyers have a much higher incidence of alcoholism than the general public, but most of them skipped over the questions on drug use. So we don't know, but the guy that led the study, this man, Patrick Krill, who was the lead investigator, I interviewed him for the Times piece and for this, and he said, "I think it's much, much higher than we think, but they are so afraid of talking about it that even on an anonymous survey, they will not answer the question." So,
And is that because they're afraid if they acknowledge it and go to rehab, there won't be a job for them?
exactly. Especially at the top of the profession, there's a lot of intense competition, and you cannot show weakness. You know, especially if you're a partner, so if you go away on a sabbatical, everybody knows you're drying out or but the chances are, Peter was an impaired partner leading cases. His firm could have been liable for all kinds of malpractice. I mean, right. So I think he felt certainly that if he told anybody that he needed help, he was finished. His legal career was finished, he'd be disbarred. That isn't the truth. You can go and get help and come back, but I think you're absolutely right. I think especially
In his mind, yeah, in his mind.
yeah, that it's not gonna work well if you tell someone. I'll do this and then this. Okay.
Did you ever learn how he got started?
Oh, that's what I was
No, I wish I could. In fact, on Fresh Air, she asked me. I mean, I think no one starts putting needles into their body. It usually starts with something else. He liked Vicodin and Percocet because whenever any of us had dental work, he would grab what was left and say he was using it for his back. And he used to tell me it made him feel great, and he wished he could get it in the medication. So I think he probably started with that. I did some investigative stuff with people that, off the record were telling me some things they noticed, people that he worked with. And I think he started getting pills off the dark web like the minute we separated. Because I would have known and it wouldn't have been okay. So we separated, and I think he started getting supplements or amphetamines, things like that. And then he did like Coke. He probably started doing that. And then I think ultimately you kick it up a notch, you try some meth, and then you think, what if he was a chemist by training before he became a lawyer. Mm-hmm. He had a master's in chemistry. He figured, I'll heat it up and I'll inject it. I'll be very careful and I'll see what that is like.
That was the same question.
Oh, yeah, I used to think like, oh my gosh, like how did he go from just being like this overweight husband that doesn't do it to all of a sudden, and I learned through my research that it's a slippery slope. It can be a steep slope, but I think in professions, white collar professions, what I heard from people that were in recovery was that there were mostly men, but they said if you're not injecting, then you're not an addict. So that was the line that all of them, they could do all kinds of, they could snort heroin as long as they weren't putting it into a needle. They felt like, I'm good. I know what I'm doing. So it's an odd line, but.
How are your children doing?
That's so sweet of you, Tiff. They're doing okay. They'll always, they're not going to be the same after something like this happens. And I think my son especially was profoundly affected because he watched it happen. He was home that year. His sister was at college. So, they have their down moments and anxiety. But for the most part, they're doing really well. My daughter graduated from college 2 years ago. My son's graduating this year. They seem, they're good kids. They're such good kids. So, and they were really open about sharing their story, which, they had a lot of shame at first that this could happen in their family. But now I think they understand that it's really healing to share it.
He said that he was, his participation at work for 4 to 5 months, he wasn't showing up.
Right.
Did any of his coworkers reach out to him? Were you able to, I mean, I find it odd.
I know, it's odd, isn't it? I tried to reach out to his coworkers, but Wilson forbid them. No one was allowed to speak to me for this book or the story. And they just said the line was they didn't know. I know the people that he worked with knew he was really sick. And I know he made a big mistake, which is in the book, filing some important documents for a big pharmaceutical client. And there was a woman he worked with who was an associate who was up for partnership that year, and I had said to him, is this going to affect her chance of making a partner? And he said, I don't know, it could, and she didn't make partner because of it. So he was making some really big mistakes, and he wasn't like that. He was a very thorough human being, very deliberative. He was a scientist. And his boss told me at his house that Peter was probably going to lose his job. But like you say, he was so sick, it's kind of mind-boggling that no one pulled him aside and said, look, something's going on with you. Tell us, let us help you. Because I think they would have helped him.
Denial is not a movement either.
So, forgive me for not knowing your background. Is this your first full book?
This is my first book. I've been a journalist for about 30 years, and I wrote for a bulk of that for the New York Times, writing business and startups and technology and stuff like that.
Okay, so, well, that's a lead-in to, did you find because it's such a personal thing that that you found that it really flowed and you ended up writing more than you ever thought? Or was it very tough to write a book because it was such a personal thing and it would stop you?
You know what, I think I felt really sick from not being able, I didn't tell anybody what happened, the truth, for about 1.5 years. I was really afraid. I was afraid for my kids. I was afraid of his firm. It felt very John Grisham-y. Like, they didn't say don't talk about it, but they took his profile off the website. They packaged up his office and sent it to me within days of his death. You know, it was very clear. They were like, let's get this funeral. Let's get everybody back to, you know, so I felt like, and we needed them. They were helping us, you know, he had a lot of investments in the firm. They were helping pay the rest of his salary. They were helping insure my kids. I was a writer. I had no income compared to him. So I needed their help, and I felt afraid. And I also felt kind of afraid to talk about it. So when I finally did start writing, it was like I just had to kind of vomit it out. Like I did. It was hugely cathartic, and it helped me. That's how I process things. So I had more than this, and we cut it down, but I did. It was actually really great to be able to write it and make sense of it. So no, and for this book at least, I had no problem writing it. Who knows if it was a different book.
Thank you.
Your tone seemed to be more neutral than maybe other people would feel very angry. Did you purposely write it with a more objective tone, or did you not, or are there some instances of a lot of anger at him?
I think I felt really angry when it first happened, more that he would be so selfish, like to kind of ditch the three of us, because we really relied on him. He was the economic engine. You know, I couldn't have lived in San Diego without him. It's a very expensive city, and you know, he had built a life where our kids were in private school. Like, there was a lot of stuff we counted on him for. And so I was very angry at that, and also I was angry at the way he behaved for 1.5 years. But by the time I was writing the book, and from researching what happened to him and kind of learning what was happening to other people that were professionals, I wound up developing an enormous amount of compassion for him. By the time I was writing it, I also, even though he could be a bully financially to me, we were still friends. Like, when it wasn't a conversation about money, which, his resentment of having to pay support, we had a good relationship. You know, he didn't have a lot of friends because he worked all the time. So our mutual friends wound up really being mine because he didn't do anything to keep those up. So he relied on me for some emotional support. And we would talk about our kids, talk about our families. He would complain about work. Sometimes it felt like we'd never divorced. He complained about work so much, to be honest. But so I think that there's a part of me that is angry, and angry at how he treated me and us. But there's also, I also love him and loved him, and I felt really bad for him. I think finding somebody who has died that way, it does not look like a pleasant death or a peaceful death, and I just felt really bad for him that he was so physically sick, I could not ask for help. So yeah, I think that's why it comes off more neutral. By the time I was writing the book, I didn't feel angry anymore.
Do you think there were maybe some undiagnosed psychiatric conditions? I mean, could he have had depression, and was this a way of self-medicating? And
Yeah. I think it's, well, lawyers have a much higher incidence of depression and anxiety also than in other professions and in the general population. And yes, for sure. I mean, he was, I'm now in school for social work, and so I'm reading the DSM-5, and I'm like, oh, I think he had this. But I do. I think he was very rarely happy. He was always kind of still waters run deep, and at first I thought that was very attractive. And then, after 15 years, you're like, oh my God, this guy is so negative. Everything was glass half empty. Everybody was trying to rip us off. And I think he was very depressed. He was adopted. His parents were evangelical, which made God the most important person, and then everybody else. So here you are, you've lived in a foster home for 4 months, then you're adopted, and then and his parents loved him, but I mean, it was always God first, and then you guys, and so he had a lot of issues in that way.
That's what I was gonna ask about his upbringing.
Yeah.
A happy childhood.
He did, and also, it isn't in the book, because my daughter didn't want me to, but he had some also abuse as a kid, from like physical abuse. Brief, and that's also a huge predictor of addiction later in life, so.
Sorry, another
No, it's so wonderful that you have questions.
Given all of the secrecy surrounding this issue, how did you get access to the information?
Yes, it was not easy, because you're not going to get a lawyer. The general counsel of Peter's firm said, we have an EAP that anybody can use. It's an employee assistance program. And the thought that a partner in a law firm who has a drug addiction is going to call an anonymous agent right, and say, like, I got to tell you something. I mean, it's absurd. Peter suspected everybody, so. But I couldn't get lawyers to talk to me on the record as who they were. So I did, I harnessed technology. So it's a very 21st century way of researching. But I posted on a forum called Hacker News, which has about 400,000 visits a day. And that's for technologists, scientists, doctors, some lawyers, and then another forum called toplawschools.com, which sounds like it's just for law students, but it's actually for lawyers too. And they have all these different forums where people post about work and getting into law school and law firms and everything. And I posted questions there saying, I wrote this story in the New York Times because a lot of them had posted about it after that. And I said, I'm doing a book now. All I want to know is, what do you use or what do you see around you? I don't need to know your name. I don't need to know anything about you. And so for Hacker News, in 10 hours, I got 600 responses. And a lot of people didn't respond because I didn't have an encrypted email, which I soon then got, because that's how suspect they were. Like, I'm not going to even talk in this forum. And then on toplawschools.com, I got about 75 responses, which was pretty good for lawyers. And then they directed me to some other places, forums where people were talking. And that way, and from that, then some people allowed me to call them up and talk to them. I met with some of them. I traveled around the country. I also went to high-end rehabs, like in Malibu, in Sundance, Utah, in New Canaan, Connecticut, and I talked to largely men, those were white-collar professionals who were trying to stop using, or people that were in recovery. And then some people who were still struggling, who had relapsed and had been back and forth, to talk about what caused them to use, what they used, and what they were seeing. And the other thing I did is I went to a forum in New York. It was called the New York City Salon. It's a bunch of really smart technology people that came together and formed this group that has about 3,000 people now. And every month they get together and they have somebody kind of present their research or what they're working on. And then they all break into groups and they discuss it. And so I presented one week about my book, and I talked to all of these. There were about 40 people there, and I asked them, all young professionals in science, technology, and medicine, and asked them about their drug use, and they were very forthcoming. So I did learn a lot about it.
Did you, I can't remember if this is actually part of it, but did you ever find that the employers actually helped perpetuate it? Either, clearly by not seeing it or choosing not to see it, but was there anything further that you found out in your research that in order to be able to extract more from their employees, that they...
Oh, well, certainly in law, there is a grueling culture of it's billable hours, where you have to bill every 6 minutes of your time, and it's relentless. And there is kind of a compassionless top where it's like, I don't care if your wife just had a baby, I don't care if your mother's in the hospital, you know, you're gonna get this brief done. And that culture has changed very little. And I think that there is so little autonomy for associates. That was the #1 cause of depression and anxiety, because they have no control over their lives. Everything has to do with what the partner tells you. And also, when you get to be a partner, I remember saying to Peter, okay, fine, now you're a partner. Now you will be home more. And he was like, are you kidding? Now I have to get business all the time. So all he had to do was it was this constant pressure to develop business. So I think, and finance is kind of like that too, where you're required to put in very long hours. You know, you're working when the market's open and closed, but then you're also doing all this other stuff for clients and generating business. And I think there's no ability to have any kind of balance in your life. And I think that causes depression and then substance use.
You said something about the pain pills started when you were separated. Was that about the time of the divorce, or was it longer? I was just trying to get a time.
No, so we were separated for a year, but we stayed married. I think the idea, I needed health insurance. And we weren't sure if it was, and then we divorced. Yes, and I think my son broke his wrist after when we were separated, and I remember Peter coming in and I said, I'm not giving him any more Vicodin because he was so loopy. And Peter was like, no, he definitely doesn't need to be on that. He can be on Advil, but I'm going to take these, for my back. And I was like, oh yeah, you take them. I'm much safer with you. So I think, that's one example, but I think, I think it's like that, And then when I cleaned out his house, he had multiple prescriptions, and he had other people's prescriptions. So I think he was just, and then he could buy them.
But do you have any, we're all in here with knowing about Vicodin and pain pills. Do you think that could have been one of the initiates? I have a cousin who confessed she's a survivor of everything, and she does everything well, but she says she had to get off drugs because they had given her the pills and she had an addiction problem. So Absolutely. I was wondering if that was something that you think could have initiated.
I do. I think he really liked it, and so he wanted more of it. In his house, we lived very close to Mexico, so you don't need a prescription for a lot of things at pharmacies. Mm-hmm. He had these giant bottles of tramadol, which is an opioid painkiller. It's in the same family as morphine, so it's a narcotic. And he didn't, he just went down there and he bought a 500 pill bottle. Oh. Yeah. And if you're wealthy, you don't have to use heroin because you can afford to spend $5 a pill or $10 a pill on OxyContin or whatever.
I had a tooth pulled and they gave me 6.
Yeah, they're really careful now.
Really careful, yeah.
Did you find out from how easy it is for people to get drugs off the dark web?
I tried to do a little bit. I started to get scared that I would be in trouble. So, but I think it's not that hard to figure out how to navigate because I could figure out pretty easily how to get in. And I have written about technology and I'm not afraid of it, but I'm not savvy in that way. But I don't think it's that difficult. This person that knew Peter said that she saw that he was getting boxes with Chinese labels and he said, oh, they're supplements. So I'm sure whatever supplements they were supplementing something they shouldn't have been.
Based on the culture of the law firm that he was working with, has there been any opportunity for follow-up? Here's this powerful firm. They had an employee who was very high up.
Yeah.
Who was going through this awful ordeal and died. Did they do anything to change their culture? Or did they do anything to address how the employees feel about it?
That is a great question, and they did nothing. All they did was pretend it didn't happen. And I will say that I'm doing an event with the San Diego County Bar Association and another group next week. And they were saying, oh, we're going to try to get a firm to sponsor this. And I said, you should ask Wilson. And they were like, oh, we can't ask them. And I said, no, this is a chance for them. They signed this lawyer well-being pledge. Because after the Time story came out, that and the Hazelden Betty Ford study prompted the Bar Association to come up with this lawyer well-being pledge. And there's a lawyer mental health day now. They're trying. So they asked them to sponsor it. They only asked them for $2,000. I told them to ask for 10. I said, that's what they spend for soda in the conference rooms each month. They were soda, but they did. So they agreed to buy the first 70 books. And I'm going to speak at Stanford, has a center on the legal profession, and 2 people from Wilson and Palo Alto are going to have dinner with me before, which is a big thing for them because I've never been able to kind of confront them. I know, my daughter was like, you let them have it. But I think you're so right, Lisa. They didn't do, I felt like all they did was hide it. All they wanted to do was make it go away. Never talked about it. wouldn't address, all to say that they didn't know either, you know.
It's horrible for the employees.
I have no voice, I'm sorry, but I'm in industry and nobody, partner or otherwise, would be left alone or ignored for 4 to 5 months if they just stopped working or didn't show up. So I find it really odd. That
And what industry are you, would you,
Life sciences.
life sciences, is it consulting? Or,
We deliver to the biotechs, biopharma,
You do.
big pharma of the world.
that's,
So it
good
seems
to
so
hear.
odd that a huge law firm would ignore, do nothing, just turn their head and do absolutely nothing.
well, I think
And
they felt like they did something because they told them to go to the doctor. But you're right. Sorry, I didn't mean to,
Yeah, but it's just like, and of course they're a law firm, but it's like, there's gotta be, I would think, some type of feeling of accountability somehow on their part,
Yeah.
or lack thereof.
Well,
You know,
and
and-
at Peter's funeral, his memorial service, we had to have it really quick. His firm was pressing me to do it.
Yeah.
Like, I have an email from his boss, it wasn't even 24 hours, he goes, is it too soon to ask about a memorial service? And I was thinking like, yeah, you know, kind of is. But they didn't, at the funeral, I have a scene in the book where like, I looked back because one of the associates is sobbing, talking about Peter, and everybody's on their phones, like, they couldn't stop working, you know, like, it was like insane. I mean, I wanted to stand up and go like, what are you doing, you know, and at his house, I had asked his boss who showed up, I'm just gonna say a curse, but it's what he said. I said, why didn't you say so? Why didn't you intervene? I said, you knew him for 12 years, and he said, we don't get into each other's shit. He said, that's not what happens in a law firm. And I was thinking, well, that has to change, because that's crazy.
Right.
So yes.
What I was gonna say was, not that I'm defending the law firm at all, but no, but you were saying you knew something was wrong, and he did not want people to know,
He
obviously.
did, and he was good at hiding it.
Well,
Yeah.
that's what I'm saying, so just to that point about the law firm, you know, you who saw him all the time, his kids, and you weren't able.
Well,
you want-
his colleagues probably saw him more than we
Well,
did.
yeah.
But
But
certainly
he didn't
not
want
in
people to
Silicon.
know.
In Palo Alto, they didn't see him. They really
Right.
didn't know. So it's possible the people that were close to him really didn't understand what they were saying. Totally.
Or he was saying the same thing to
legit.
them as he was saying to you.
Right, and he was lying to everybody, and you know, it's possible they did think like, okay, you know, or maybe he's got cancer, I'm not gonna ask about that, because he looked
Right.
like he could have cancer.
He obviously doesn't wanna share whatever's going on.
Doesn't wanna,
Right.
exactly.
Do a lot of these, when you talk about these lawyers and all this money, I mean, do any of them that you interviewed or say, okay, I've made enough money, I want to get out? Is that, no, that's not,
No, but I did hear when I interviewed people, there was a big thread after the New York Times story, and a bunch of these lawyers were saying, why don't these partners get out? They've got millions, and it's like, because I think the first addiction is to the work.
Right.
Like, it's such a high, you're so powerful. And I think it's such a good question. It's like, I used to say to Peter, go in-house, go be in-house counsel, you'll
Right.
spend time with us, but he would say, well, I'm only gonna make like 250 or 300,000. You know, and I was like, I think that's plenty. That sounds like a lot of money to me. And he was like, no, like, you don't understand, you're a writer, like, you're not in this world. You know, he wanted millions. And so and then when you're making it, you're like handcuffed, because how do you walk away
right.
from $1.5 million a year? I mean, you're right, he should have saved up and thought like, I have enough, now I'm gonna go work for a small firm or teach law school, but I wonder that myself. I think it's very seductive and very addictive.
The interview with Terry Gross, it was interesting that she labeled it, she didn't label it smacked or anything like that. She labeled it, she titled it a widow, but not a
Not a
wife.
wife.
And I thought it was really interesting. Can you tell us why?
Yes, because I have in the book that after the day he died, I'm driving back and I realized like I'm gonna have to now figure all of this out for my kids because there was no one else to do it. And of course I wanted to do it for my kids, but I thought, well, I'm a widow, even though I'm not his wife, because it really felt like that again. It's like I'm getting his ashes and I'm arranging the funeral service and I'm settling his estate, and it really felt like that. In some ways, it felt like I kind of became his wife again because there wasn't anybody else to do it, and I think I've kind of felt like I ought to. You know, he was my friend and partner for half my life, and we had these kids together, and I wanted to kind of do it right. I wanted to make sure everything was settled. So I did. I sort of felt like, I'm speaking at his funeral, and I had someone messaged me the next day on Facebook saying, I don't know many ex-wives that would have done that. And I wanted to say, like, I don't feel like an ex-wife anymore. Like, I feel like I got drafted back into the team, you know? So,
Because it took a long time for you to close the estate, too.
yeah, it took 2 years. California probate is the worst in the country. And he'd been so sick, he hadn't filed his taxes in 3-4 years. And his house was right by the beach, so you have to maintain it, or the salt air. So it was, you know, everything was rusted and broken and and I didn't know the first thing about buying a house, selling a house, repairing a house. I had left that to him in my marriage, which was my own fault. But so yeah, so it was quite an education, and it took a very long time.
Have you found any other journalists who are pursuing the same kind of story, the same issue, and have you collaborated with them?
I haven't collaborated. I'm sure there are. I know of other journalists who have written about the opioid crisis, like Beth Macy wrote this book, Dope Sick. Sam Quinones wrote this great book, Dreamland, about the opioid, how the opioid crisis started. And I think there's been like there's a woman, Lisa Smith, who I interviewed for my story, who has a memoir called Girl Walks Out of a Bar, about being an alcoholic and a cocaine addict while she was at Pillsbury and some other really big firms. So, you know, there probably are, but I haven't collaborated with any. I might wind up doing that at events, but other than that, I haven't yet.
This might be too personal a question. If it is, don't answer it. But since your husband seemed to be so good at hiding, do you think that his addiction started before you got divorced and maybe was part of the reason for that?
You know, it is possible that he started using stuff before we divorced, for sure, because if he was doing coke or if he was, I mean, he could have been snorting heroin, I wouldn't have noticed. But I don't think he was, because he was so tired all the time. So if he was doing anything that was a stimulant or amphetamine, I would have noticed it. And he certainly wasn't injecting, because I saw his body, and he, you know. So I think he might. I knew he was smoking pot, and I knew he was. He may have occasionally been doing coke, but I don't think it had risen to the level of an addiction until after, a few years after.
Just, I don't know if you can even answer this question, but do you think he really was, like, wanted to just die, like like there wasn't really anything you could have done, and if there was something, what would it have been? Like,
I know, that's a question I have wrestled with. And my son thinks that if we had divorced earlier, Peter would have died sooner, because he thinks the only reason that he stopped giving in to what he really wanted to do was because I wouldn't have, I mean, I'm just not I don't even, you know, I hardly even drink. I'm just not a big substance, and I wouldn't have, it just wouldn't have been possible for him to do it while he was married to me, because I would have seen it and stopped it or left.
Yeah.
So, you know, and I do think there was something a little bit self-destructive about him. I think he was very unhappy, and he couldn't figure out how to be happy.
Yeah.
Like, just cleaning out his house. In the book, I talk about all the things I found. I mean, he just bought and bought and bought, trying to buy his way out of whatever discomfort he was feeling.
Yeah.
And I think that says something about us as a society, too. I think look at all the addictions we have, shopping and, you know, food and chocolate, and we're hoarders, and we're addicted to exercise, and, you know, like, whatever, you know, we're all so busy not wanting to sit still and just be that we're, you know, I think there's a lot of existential angst. I think Peter figured if he was busy enough, he would be immortal, which, you know, so I do think it was a little bit self-destructive.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
even if
I think even if we'd gotten him to the hospital that day, right? So he had an infection he had acute infected endocarditis, which means some injection site got infected, and that injection spread and lodged itself in his heart.
Oh.
And from there, it sent out infections to the rest of his body. So he had, part of his heart valve had broken off, he had it in his brain and his kidneys, all over his body. He didn't know that that's why he was also so sick.
Yeah.
So it was very unlikely he would have survived the night. If he had, he would have had to have a heart surgery, he would have had to be on antibiotics for months. And then the statistics say that you relapse between 4 and 5 times before you can really be in long-term recovery, so.
So I wonder about this endocrinologist who had,
oh,
like,
please,
I mean, come on,
tried to
like,
find him.
like he must have had, you know,
Right.
track marks and all this other things, and he comes up with Hashimoto's, but
doesn't.
Do you think that's really what
Yeah.
he said, or do you think that's just something that Peter
Peter
picked
described
from?
this guy to me, he thought this endocrinologist was so funny. He was some older guy that was so senior that he would walk down the hallway, Peter said, and throw the patient's charts on the floor, and the secretaries would come and pick them up. Like he sounded like a total jerk, but Peter liked him. He was very narcissistic, this guy. But I think I did do some research, and I did call the endocrinologist office. They wouldn't give me any information, but I asked them what they test for. They only test for the markers for thyroid. So they're not testing for other substances, so they wouldn't have known. And I think Peter was very clever. He knew when the appointment was. He probably stopped using on one side and only had that arm. And so he'd healed by then. He was a very smart man. I'm sure he figured out how to hide it. That's it. Yes, Martha.
So what's next for you? Obviously, this is a great book and getting a lot of traction, as you say, and I mean, where do you
So I after finding Peter, I did kind of have my own come to Jesus moment where I thought, even though it was horrible at that moment, I thought, this is going to happen to you. Not like this, but, you have a limited time on earth as well. And I thought, how do I want the rest of it to look? And I realized I was kind of tired of writing about what I'd been writing about, and decided that I'd already been volunteering in San Diego at a school for homeless kids, and I was very interested in social issues and social justice, which I'd always been very politically active. So I went back to school to get a master's in social work, and I'm almost done. I'll be done in September. I had to put my field work off I did one semester, I have one more left. And then I'm hoping that I can do a combination of social work and writing about other things, not necessarily the business stuff I was doing. Well, thank you for asking. Thank you guys so much for your great questions.
Really, just in closing, I just want to thank you, because really, it's so important that people talk about this. And the stigma of addiction is so poo-pooed, and we're so shamed for it. And you know what? It's a disease, like anything else. And people don't want it. They don't sign up to be heroin addicts. They don't sign up to die. So I really appreciate that you coming out and making it something that people can see in a different light, because it's not, your husband wasn't some guy living in the Bowery.
That's right.
He was a successful man who had a drug problem and died. And we have to remember that, everybody has something, and we have to be kind.
That's right. Everybody's a story to think about.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you.